lot of feathers. I mean, it's great, but I think a lot of people are particularly sensitive in the publishing industry.
Well, ruffling feathers isn't a bad thing to do in the publishing industry. In fact, a lot of people try and do it intentionally. I didn't write it with the intention of publishing it. I just wrote it. It was this very sincere sort of. I think this is worth talking about. This is nuts. I'm 34. It's 2004, and we live in the modern world, and I'm worried God's going to kill me if I don't mutilate this kid the right way. That might be worth putting down on paper. And I think that if I had written a book that said God bad, me good, or Judaism is stupid, and so are all the other religions. First of all, Hitchens already wrote that book. But I think that they saw that wasn't what this was. This was, primarily the story is about someone trying to find themselves. The fact that it could have taken place anywhere. A lot of the humor comes from the ludicrousness of the idea and the relationship it had with this asshole in the sky, but everything else is very sort of, there's no negative intent at all. In fact, when I started to do sort of interviews for the book, and naturally the first one's lining up, sometimes with knives in their pockets, sometimes not, which were Jewish media, and I kept saying, look, to be totally honest, this isn't about me and you. This is between me and him. So stay out of it. Because it could have been it's the same God as Revelations, it's the same God as the Quran. It's just an ancient war God, and it's how do you get away from it? So I think that's why it wasn't just, boy, this is going to upset people. Naturally, the people who react predictably to these things reacted predictably. But most other people didn't. And now they have Amazon, so they can go there and give it 1 star and feel like a hero. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your son? How is he doing and how old is he?
He's a rabbi. He's great. He's great. He's never heard that if he eats a cheeseburger, God's going to flood the world. I don't even have that book in the house. He believes in Spider-Man, and he is a very devoted believer to that cause. And mostly, I don't really, when we were messing around, you do this game. I don't know if you have kids, but you do this game where you play the scruples with yourself, and you say, okay, what can possibly happen where I'll hate him, or I won't love him? Is there a point? Since we both came from families that had conditions for that, and we just didn't want to do that. So, but you never know if you do. So my wife had her own worst case scenario, and mine was, okay, so he's 20 years old, he walks in the door and he's a chassid. Do I love him still? And it's just ludicrous, of course. I don't care what he does. I mean, if it makes him happy, if it gives him some sort of comfort, then what's that going to do with me? So, and that's what we're trying to do. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say I love Beware of God.
Thank you.
Bought a lot of copies, gave them to friends. And I found Forsker's lament fascinating, but so different.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts as to why it is that after having left the fold, that somehow or other you've retained this fear of God while jettisoning all the practices,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to the opposite, which I think is kind of more normal, where you leave God, but you still kind of do a modicum of observance.
Yeah, well, there are probably a lot of sort of psychology 101 reasons for it. What I think is that in the first place, there were 2 things that I needed to get away from. One was family, which is real and physical, and one is this character. Family is physical, so I can, as I go through life, I can see their changes. I can start to understand that maybe I don't need to be with them. Maybe we just don't like each other, and my relationship with them can change. But I was taught this stuff from 4 years old. I was speaking Yiddish at a young age. I was taught these horrifying stories, and the worst part about it was they weren't lying. They weren't being hypocritical. They believed it, and my teachers believed it. My friends believed it. The whole community believed it. They acted and behaved according to it. And I was there for 20 years, and so it hasn't, even though I can intellectually say, it doesn't make any sense, there's an emotional, I've had floods in my house where I've gotten all the water out, but you still have mold a long time later. It doesn't always go away. And so that's pretty much what this is. It's mold. I kill for an atheist certainty that nobody's watching my every move. I just can't. There's that little voice that's playing the odds. Well, what if they're right? And what if he's taking vengeance right now? So none of it's particularly complex. It's not like I have an advanced theology about God's assholeitude and why it's affecting me. It's just that's what I was taught. I can't break it. The Jesuits say that give me a boy till he's 7, I'll give you the man, and they know what they're doing. Sure.
Did you consider having photographs at all? I'm thinking about, as it's your memoir, photographs of you when you were Orthodox and the past, and I just thought that would really be pretty interesting.
I don't have any photographs of myself because I had a very sort of bad breakup with the family, and as I was leaving the house, it didn't occur to me to take the pictures off the wall. So I don't. In part of the book, I talk about. I worry about that in terms of my son. That I sometimes feel like my wife, because she has a similar problem. We're like Adam and Eve, like we're sort of born when we were 20 as adults, and there's no pictures of Adam and Eve in camp and in the kindergarten play. In the book, I write a letter to him to try and explain that I use stock advertising photos of strangers to say this is kind of what my mother looks like, and it's just old women crying, so that kind of thing. But I just don't have the picture. Sure.
Do you have any kind of community? Because I know the kind of community you grew up in was very intense and intact, and people were in each other's lives a lot. What kind of social world do you live in today?
A very odd one. I'm perfectly cool being alone anyway. But we have friends that are kind of all over the place. Just briefly, the idea behind the title is that after obsessing about my son's foreskin for so long, it occurred to me at a certain point that I felt a bit like the foreskin, cut off and bloodied and thrown away. And how many of my friends that either live nearby or that are friends of mine who live here or wherever are also foreskins, also left. And it just seems that there's quite a bit of that, quite a bit of people who don't necessarily fit into one area, who may have bad families or pasts and are constantly moving, changing homes and communities, but stay together. There's a sort of loose-knit foreskinville. And that's where I live. Yeah.
Did you have any contact with your family at the time the baby was born? Did they come visit, or?
There was some. That was sort of toward the end of. We already were not speaking for long stretches, and there are parts in the book where I discuss what happened, and it was fittingly bizarre. But what the basic story is that we had a very difficult birth, and I didn't think my son was going to make it out. And naturally, I thought that was God's. That was my Moses moment of getting just to the promised land and then bam, killing you. So let me see the kid, let the head come out, and then we take him back. And so after some very frightening times, he made it out and everything was okay. But very shortly after that, a doctor walked in on cue, as if God sent by God, and said, "So you're gonna cut him like I told you to, or what?" And so that's what we decided to do with the doctor. And I thought, well, at the very least, my deal was, okay, no rabbi, no blessing. If we're going to do this, just make it a medical procedure. But I thought that, I was, my family was going to be thrilled, because I would have thought that they'd expect me to not do that at all. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting a phone call, and a couple of days later, my mother asking me if there was going to be a circumcision, which should have been on the 8th day, according And I thought I was giving her good news. I was like, well, you know, we did it. Don't worry about it. It's done. He's in. And as I describe it in the book, I felt like I'd gotten to the last round of Jeopardy and forgot to phrase the answer as a question, because the fact of it being done or not wasn't the point.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know, maybe she really wanted some honey cake or wine or something, I don't know. But she seemed to get very upset that there was no. And that was when it was sort of like, all right, so on.
Can I ask where you have siblings, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Are you like the oldest or in the middle?
Middle.
Oh.
Yeah. That middle kid. Gotta watch him. Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.